that once you lose that deal, give yourself a chance to process what has actually happened. Because really, for me and Carlos, our mantra is always, it's always my fault, right? It's always the salesperson's fault. Yes, with the exception of the dreamers and those deals that are out there and are really, really not qualified. Okay, fine. But if there's a deal that you should close, you should have maybe a 90% close rate. If you are following a process, I would say if you're qualifying hard to close easy, you should have a 90% close rate. And so it's important to have an archive of deals that you've lost, so you can analyze where did things go south. Okay, but I like to have an abundance. Oh, abundance. Hey, closers.
Abundance. Hey, closers. What was that, Soph? You want to be abundant?
Are you abundant? I know if you're listening to this podcast, you're a magnet of clients who are eager to do business with you.
I like that magnetic energy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, closers.
Ever flowing.
You've got the abundant, the ever abundant Carlos and Sofia coming right at you from Miami. And today, we got an episode for you today. Before you go any further, get to the like button, get to the subscribe button, because we've got an episode for you today.
That's right.
Actually, I don't think we have. We haven't scripted anything, Sophia. We haven't even decided anything.
This just came to me. Let us pour some prosperity into your cup.
See what you did? See what you did?
See that?
See what you did there? Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So,
can you hear? You're not hearing the leaf blower go crazy out there, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay, good.
No.
All right. Okay. Just wanted to check before.
So you know what? We haven't prepared anything for today, which is never a good start. But we haven't. Well, I have an idea. Are you okay if I take the chair on this? If I take the lead on this?
Please take us on a ride, and I will follow.
So, for the last 10 years or more, a little more, it's about 10 years. Now I can hear the leaf blower. For the last,
I know
it's amazing. It's like always. Do they know when we're going to record a podcast?
Yeah, they're like, go now, go.
Oh, go on, they're ready.
Go.
She's about to sign in. And go.
We were just talking for like 30 minutes on Riverside.
Yeah.
No leaf blower. Record. Yeah. Go. Hit it. Crank that shit.
So around 10 years ago, when we started in this business, in some ways it's been a journey of extraordinary prosperity and success. And in some ways it's been a journey of woe, tales of woe after tales of woe. And in our true unscripted way, I wanted to bring since we started the business, I have kept a log of sales fails. I've kept a log of those deals. Now, to qualify for my log, the deal had to be, in my estimation, a selling failure, not a qualification issue, right? So it has to be something that I believed was entirely closable, because some deals aren't closable. Like some deals are just, I don't know, crazy idea from somebody who's got no money or is not really committed to any change. There are some deals that just aren't real deals. And that's the frogs you've got to kiss in the search for the prince, right? You got to kiss a lot of frogs. But there are some deals where it's an absolute legit deal that I know I was the best person to fulfill. Everything kind of lined up, but completely blew it from a selling perspective. Just a complete sale fail. And I've made to, if the deal in my estimation, and you'll never know, it's not a perfect measure, but if in my estimation that deal was a one that was material, I didn't do all the little onesie twosies, but the material deal that was a fail from a selling perspective, I've made a note of it in the log, in the deal log. And I've estimated the economics that I spilled down the toilet when I, messed up that deal. So question for you. Why do you think I've kept this log? What's the purpose? What's the, as let's do a Silence of the Lambs moment. As Marcus Aurelius said, ask of everything, what is it in its nature? What is the nature of that deal? Why have I kept that log, do you think?
Well, I think it's an archive to reflect on of expensive mistakes, and I think it's important for us salespeople to when you blow a deal, it should sting a little bit. Now, don't wallow for a week. It should sting a
Well, it
little
depends
bit.
on the deal.
It
It can be,
depends on the deal.
I've had a few. I've
Yeah,
had a
right.
few
There's
that have
some
made me
deals.
wallow for a week. Yeah.
Well, I still am losing sleep over the one that we've been discussing on this podcast for what feels like months now. So you're right. But the idea is that once you lose that deal, give yourself a chance to process what has actually happened. Because really, for me and Carlos, our mantra is always, it's always my fault. Right? It's always the salesperson's fault. Yes, with the exception of the dreamers and those deals that are out there and are really, really not qualified. Okay, fine. But if there's a deal that you should close, you should have what, maybe a 90% close rate. If you are following a process, I would say if you're qualifying hard to close easy, you should have a 90% close rate. And so it's important to have an archive of deals that you've lost, so you can analyze where did things go south? How can I prevent
that 90% close rate stat? I would wholeheartedly agree with. Now, before our listeners storm the stage and wrestle us to the ground and say, "Carlos,
no,
Sofia,
please
you're
don't."
crazy." It's 90% of qualified deals.
Right.
It's
Not yeah, you're not going to right, exactly.
of the world that you talk to.
No.
And one of the problems I think a lot of our clients face, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners, and us too, by the way, a lot of the problems we have is we're never really quite sure if something is qualified or not. Now, so then what do? Do you berate yourself, think everything's qualified, and think your close rate's terrible?
No.
Or do you congratulate yourself by thinking anybody that doesn't sign with you was unqualified? Neither's helpful.
Nope.
Neither of those strategies are helpful.
If you blew a deal and the way you're processing it is, oh, that prospect was a 4-letter word of some variety, that's not helpful, and you're not owning your part of it. Even though some of our prospects can be 4-letter words, what is own your part of it? Because otherwise we're not learning anything from the experience, and we're bound to fall in that hole again.
And we've had people on our team, Soph, who haven't owned this spirit of it's always my fault. We've had people that would always externalize the fail, right? It was always somebody else's fault. It's their fault, boss. It's the leads, boss. It's the market. It's the pricing. It's the service. It's take your pick from the list. This is an age-old debate within selling. Whose fault is it? And we think it's healthy to come from a starting position, a presumption of it's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and by the way, just to clear up the 90% close rate, we believe that if you are sending a quote proposal, doing a presentation, you should be at least 90% sure that person's going to say yes. So that's really what we mean by the 90% close rate for any listeners.
And yet we have clients. We do have clients that are quote shops, right? Wallpaper in Miami or their central city with wherever they're based with quotes. That isn't healthy. But I've got a client with a 70% close rate in an industry that typically has a 15% close rate. So you can't look at that 70% close rate and give them a smack round the head with a 2x4. That's 70 versus 15, 1-5.
Pretty darn good.
Pretty darn good. And they feel pretty good about themselves, as they should. And you know who I'm talking about, because I know some of you listen to the podcast. So
right.
You know who I'm talking about.
So let's get into sales fails.
So I thought it would be interesting today to dip into the bag of sales fails. Dip into that little pick and mix, and let's pick out
an adult beverage.
And let's pick out one of those fails and figure out, what exactly was at play here. Where's the spill in the pro? And I've done legitimately no prep apart from get my log out. But where was the spill? Where's the lesson? Where did the system come off the rails?
How much?
Where did I blow it? How much did it cost? And yeah, and you could do one too. Think of one while I'm going. You think of one. Right. You're going to ask me, so kind of like interview me about the fail, and I'll give you the. Let me look at my log. I'm
Oh,
going to
you.
talk,
Let
and
me
we're going to
ask you
do
this
no
before
names.
you
We're going to
even
do no names.
no names, no
Yeah.
companies, anything. But let me ask you this, Carlos. As you look down on your list, do you see some repeated lessons in there? Because I know when I look down at my list, I see some repeated lessons in there. Maybe this episode is our declaration
Well, it didn't hurt
to the
hard enough,
universe.
right? It didn't
It
hurt
didn't
hard
hurt
enough.
hard enough.
I'll tell you one
Okay.
I've got here, actually, the one I'm going to talk
Okay,
about,
go.
which hasn't got a repeated lesson. I
Okay.
learned this lesson like wowzers. Did I learn this
Smack.
lesson? And you know why it hurt so much is I really needed the money. Like, holy shit, did I need this deal? Like, we were starving to death and I needed this deal and I absolutely blew it. So that's the first one I want to talk about. We're going to do no names. We could talk about industries and individuals sort of in generality, but I think we should save our own blushes and the blushes of our prospects who, even though what is it? They taught us a lesson. We've got to thank them for that, right? What's your favorite phrase?
Ho'oponopono. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I thank you. I love you. Thank you for being my teacher. Hawaiian prayer.
So we've got to go, but we're going to do that again in a second. But guys, this is whenever I tell Sofia about something that I blew up, this is what she says to me. Do it again.
It comes from, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So you thank that person, that situation for being your teacher. And then there's a Hawaiian prayer that you say, Ho'oponopono, which means, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I thank you. I love you. Thank you for being my teacher.
So I don't feel that about many of these, but I should do. That's the healthy way to think about it, right? Because it is always my fault. It's always my fault, but holy shimoly, I remember this deal. And it is interesting what you just said, that I haven't had to learn this again. Some of these other ones, when they, clearly they didn't hurt me bad enough, right?
Man, I mean, I'm looking at my list and I'm like, gosh, is this a karmic cycle? Like I again, no loop, de-loop.
So this was a company, and it was when we hadn't been in business long, and we needed the business like wowzers. Antonio and I needed this deal, and most of my clients, whenever I teach, this is the story I tell when I teach this particular selling topic. And the selling topic is it kind of falls within our broader basket of bonding and rapport, which is kind of done to death. Bonding and rapport, it's like every sales process.
Bonding and rapport, have great rapport.
But we do it in a very different and innovative way, I like to think. And one of the techniques that we talk about, one of the tools we talk about a lot is DISC. So for those sales rock stars out there, and I know you closers, you got to be rock. If you're listening to our show, of course you're rock stars. I would hope that you're familiar with at least the behavioral model that is DISC. You might not use it. You might not be somebody. It might not be a DISC house where you are. But DISC is a behavioral styles analysis. It's a way to assess how people like to behave and communicate with one another. And we should all know our own. If once you learn about DISC, you figure out that we should know our own style. I'm a high D style. And you develop, the real magic is developing a sense of who the person you're selling to is, what's their own style. And you develop a sense, and it actually becomes a reflex over time. And whenever I teach this topic, and then, there's a third part. So know yourself, know who you're talking to, and then do you have the style flexibility to flex into their style? They're kind of like the 3 magic steps in DISC. And whenever I teach clients, I use this story. So I'm pretty confident, Sofia, you've heard me teaching clients.
I remember this
it's
story.
The funeral home business. It's the funeral home bit. This hurt so bad, Soph.
That you wanted to try on a casket after you wanted.
I was so annoyed with myself. It's so many spills all in the same place. It's like, it was heartbreaking. I mean, legitimately heartbreaking. I don't know how I recovered from it, in fact. But I tell you what, Ho'oponopono. I got that right?
Ho'oponopono, there you go.
Because let me tell you, the lesson I learned from this, the value next to it in my deal log is $250,000. Now, for some of our listeners, For some of our listeners who are rock star
That's
closers,
chump change.
chump change. And I'm going to disclose my working class roots here, but I think $250,000 is a lot of money.
I'm
And
going
back
to
then,
expose my Caribbean immigrant parents. Right? That's a good amount of money.
and you know what? This is absolutely without a doubt in the right place on my log. There was no part of this deal that I shouldn't have closed. This should be our deal. They should still be a client 8 years on. This client should still be a client 8 years on. That should read $1 million, not 200. When I estimated this at 250,000, I had in my mind they would probably stay with us about 2.5 years. You know, it was basically $100,000 a year client, and there was a lot of them. It was a big team. It was a big client, a lot of work. It was about $100,000 a year client. I reckon if I hadn't have been such an absolute idiot, they could still be a client today. And but I blew it. So this was a funeral home business, and very interesting because, well, first of all, it's an unusual industry, that, right? Secondly, you might say to yourself, sales skills, funeral home business? Like, you know, people are dying to get into funeral home businesses, right? See what I did there? See the pun?
Nah,
People are dying to see what I did there.
Done.
No, but it's like, it's like there's always there's some like ambient demand, and they take their corner of the market. It would be easy to shortchange a funeral home business and think that selling skills and selling mastery and selling excellence isn't important. Well, certainly that was my sort of belief, my preconceived belief before I got to know this particular prospect. I was referred in by another client who loved me, referred us in as a team to this business. And as I got to know a funeral home business, I started to realize, actually, these guys are actually more like an insurance company than a funeral home. They don't make the money putting bodies in the ground. They made their money from final
pain in the future.
Plans. Pain in the future. And the whole sort of sales process around creating an emotional rather than intellectual reason to sell, prospecting behaviors, like all our stuff, connecting, creating a logical foundation to the deal, how to think about money, how to handle certain objections, how to be, how to handle your own humanity in a world rich in rejection. All our stuff, and I've just scratched it, all our stuff. It was like it was written for this client. Bonkers. And I was getting to know the owner, and it was really strange because when Sofia and I go into a big company, they've usually got a budget somewhere with sales training written on it, or sales coaching, or sales development, sales team development. There's a line in a budget somewhere in a big company. In medium-sized and smaller companies, there ain't no line, budget line. So I usually ask the question, hey, you've probably put a budget aside for this. Do you want to share with me, the kind of directionally, round numbers, where your mind was? I'll usually get in some way round to the budget question. And I usually do it with more finesse than I just did then. And I usually say those words or words like them in the absolute confidence that the answer I'm going to get is, oh, we haven't got a budget for this, because I know where to dance from there. That's like, it's almost like You're in my little web, right? I mean, I don't want you to think I'm tricky, but that I know that's part of my track. But this guy, out of nowhere, when I said, hey, you've probably put some money aside for this, you've got a budget somewhere with a line item. This guy goes, yeah, it's $100,000. I'm like, what? Nobody ever says yes to that question, unless they're a big company. Turns out, as I kind of peel the onion back, the guy who owned this business is a big corporate guy who bought these funeral home locations out of a big corporate, which meant it came with big corporate policies and
budget galore
and habits. And this guy was a corporate guy. So in many ways, this was a medium, smallish company that was behaving like a big company. And everything was lined up. I wasn't competitive. Their problems, I could help them solve. Everything was perfect, lined up perfectly. And me and this guy were getting on pretty good. The guy who was the CEO, the owner, the owner of the company. And I took all my information. I ran a great discovery, took all that information away. I designed a great program, took it back to him, and I didn't prepare properly. How crazy is that? I just didn't prepare properly. I didn't even look at my notes. If I'd have looked at my notes, because whenever I'm in a discovery, I take notice of the disc style of the person I'm speaking to. It'd have said all over it, this guy is diametrically opposed. He's in a diametrically different behavioral style than mine, and I would have adjusted, but I didn't. I was arrogant. I'd already in my mind, it was such a slam dunk that in my mind, I'd already started spending the commission. It's like I already started spending the money. This was already done. This deal was done already. And idiot. I was arrogant. I ran from one thing to the other, didn't prep properly. And I gave him a presentation that if he'd have been a D style, a high D like me, he'd have had his checkbook out before the end of the presentation. But he wasn't. He was much softer, much gentler. He was much, he didn't have that kind of A-type personality, that D, high D aggression.
No, he probably cared more about how this is going to impact his people and how
he was. I remember
for the group.
I can still hear his voice in my ear today saying, Carlos, saying things that a high D style would never say in a million years. He would say things like, he asked me questions like, Carlos, how long before the people are impacted? Because, Carlos, some of the guys on my team, they're the only wage earner in their house. And they're bringing up a family, and they're living essentially on the commissions of the sales. And I want them selling more. I want them earning more. A high D style would never say that. And I came in with a presentation that was designed for a high D style. It was like the Vikings had come through the village, pillaging and raping the way through the village. It was just, here's what we're going to do, and here are the people we're going to get rid of. And I just did entirely the wrong presentation, filled with nowhere near enough care for their team. I was all about the result and not about the people, because that's kind of how I'm naturally wired, and I didn't have the finesse to prepare properly and adjust my presentation to fit the ears of my audience.
So looping back to the beginning of the story, that word, that phrase, bonding and rapport that we throw around like a rag doll in sales, rapport was lost at the presentation. And rapport is not something we just build at the beginning. It's something that we have to maintain throughout, and we can lose it at any second, but we can gain it back at any second too. Man.
If you'd have been in that presentation, Sophie, you'll recognize that rapport wasn't lost. Lost gives you the idea that you might be able to find it again. Rapport wasn't just lost. Scorched. It was dropped on the ground, jumped up and down on, petrol poured over it, set on fire. It was cremated. And it was appropriate. It was a funeral home because it was cremated. I took one of the caskets, I filled it with all the rapport and put it through the incinerator. This cremated the rapport.
This episode is dedicated in loving memory of the rapport.
Of the rapport. Yes. Flowers and contributions are
gladiolas
received.
And everything.
Yeah, gratefully received at your last resting place, rapport.
Rest in paradise.
But I tell you what's interesting, I've never made that mistake again. Whenever I've been at the I'm very conscious now of somebody's disc style. Extremely conscious of it.
I just ran a whole coaching session with one of my clients on the first 5 minutes of a discovery call. You should be going into a discovery call. You should know the disc profile. If you've had an introduction call or someone who's, maybe it's an intake form, you should listen to that recording. You should know what you're walking into in that first 5 minutes. According to each disc profile, world's different, right?
Very different. Do you not find that the way you react and respond to somebody? Well, the thing is, you do it naturally way better than I do, because, there's something in that high I style that you've got, which makes you quite a natural mimic. You're naturally wired to reflect that energy anyway, which is cool. It's just one of your many superpowers. But I find that I have to be intentional about it, and I've got to really, really force myself. Actually, it's got easier over time. Ever since this deal, It's got way
Mhm.
easier over time.
Yep.
This was the deal that proved to me I had to be conscientious when it comes to this part of our system. I think this was a part of the system that until this deal, I could teach it. I knew it intellectually, but I didn't own it. And I needed the pain of this deal to really own it. And then over time, I become a master of it, you know?
I speak to a lot of CEOs, founders, presidents of companies, VPs that tell me that, oh, that DISC thing, it's like a personality test. Oh, we use PI. Listen, it doesn't matter which one you're using. So long as it goes beyond being a personality test to you, which DISC is not, by the way, but it goes beyond having some cool assessment results that tell you how to interact with your team. If you want to, I think that if you learn nothing, if our clients learn nothing from us at Absolute Sales Development, but DISC and the upfront contract, upfront agreements, they've struck gold.
Yeah, absolutely.
And DISC is really all about, if you are in the role of salesperson, it is your job to meet your prospect where they're at and not the other way around.
There are kind of like five magic. Well, there's probably more than five, but if I was to think of the top five, parts of the journey we take clients on, DISC is in the top five. Upfront contract, upfront agreements in the top five. I'd put transactional analysis in the top five. I'd put questioning and listening skills in the top five.
You're really good at transactional analysis. That is your magic.
Yeah, but it's learned.
Magic sauce.
It's learned. It's
learned. All of this stuff is learned.
Because, what do you do with a Lionel Messi of sales? Those people have got it wired into them. You can't replicate that. You can't watch Lionel Messi play football and say, "Oh, right, I'll do my shots like that." You're crazy. Lionel Messi was born with a very particular DNA that it is a fool's errand to try and emulate. We deal in transferable skills, not untransferable skills. So $250,000 added to the log, and I don't even want to tell you how much this log adds up to, but I tell you, I'm not going to tell you, but I will directionally a life-changing amount of money, where it was simple arrogance, inexperience, or just poor skill. Or laziness. Some of these are just simple laziness. All of it is humanity. If you wanted to boil it down, why does this list come to this very, very large number? Because I'm a human. Human beings make mistakes, not robots. So, have you got one for us, or do you want to do it at the next episode?
Next episode, you got to subscribe to our channel. You got to subscribe to our podcast.
And you get another one.
Next week, I'll give a sales feel.
And then I'll do, we'll come back to this from time to time because some of these are magic. But the key message, I think, for the team today is, if you were going to learn, so you help me out here, sir. If a listener wants to learn this lesson without having to spend $250,000 to learn it, which is the price I paid to learn this lesson, or really in reality, maybe more like $1 million, but, very easily I can assess it at $250,000. That's the price of that lesson to me. If a listener wants to learn this lesson without spending $250,000, summarize it for them. Give it them in 4 or 5 bullets.
You have to gather information when you're selling, including what motivates this prospect. What is this prospect's biggest fears? What are they afraid of? What's in it for them? Why? Why does it even matter? I'm not talking about what is their why. That's a whole other topic. So that you can frame your solution around what matters to them, because you might be presenting to what matters to you or most of your clients, but this prospect you're speaking to is maybe not most of your clients. Maybe they care about different things. So if you're spending discovery calls with anxiety about what question comes next, instead of really listening to the golden information that prospects are dropping, that is giving you clues and information about what their DISC profile is, then stop it. It will cost you $250,000. and mirror and match, because people buy from people they like, and people like people who are like themselves. So,
and you know what, guys, if you've listened all the way to the end of this, I've got a gift for you. Send Sofia or I an email, catch us on LinkedIn, send us a direct message, put a note to the podcast. We'll pick it up, and we'll send you a guide to DISC. We'll send you a cool guide so you can start learning a little bit more about DISC and how to use it in your sales endeavors. How's that for that's got to be worth a like and a subscribe, right, Sofia?
Come on.
Come on. Hey, closers, what an episode. Great to speak to you. It's goodbye from Sofia.
And it's goodbye from Carlos. Thanks for listening.
Take care. Take care, folks.